Mm. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. And it's essentially the first webinar we will have in 2026. And for this webinar, I'm super excited to have, except for me, we're three uh, great panelists. And they all come from different companies, from different domains, and they definitely have a very rich experience about with the data and infra space, right? And today we're just talk about, just have a very casual conversation regarding the trend to watch in the data infra and AI space in 2026. And well, again, I'd like to have a very quick introduction about our panelists. And first of all, I'm a founder of and the CEO of RisingWave, which is a data streaming company. And then we also have Sanjeev. Sanjeev, you want to do a very quick intro?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am not on video right now, but I'll be on video as soon as I get out of my flight, which is hugely delayed. Uh, but just as an introduction, I was in Gartner for many years. I was part of the data and analytics practice. I left 4 years ago, started my own company. I'm an independent advisor now to a number of companies. Following trends is something I do acutely every day, trying to figure out make sense of all the changes that are taking place. The speed of change has never been this fast. So that's what I do. I help my clients figure out where the technologies are going and what's happening next. So thank you for inviting me to this webinar.
Yingjun, you're on mute, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. And then we have Dinesh, right? Dinesh, yeah, you want to do a quick intro? Yeah.
Sure. So my name is Dinesh Chandrasekhar. I am the chief analyst and founder of Stratola. I've been in the IT industry for the last 32 years now. I feel old. Uh, Predominantly been in the data, AI, and automation spaces. Spent quite a lot of time in a lot of good pedigree companies like Cloudera, Hortonworks, CA, IBM, and so forth, Software AG. So I also have this reputation of having had a long stint in the data in motion space, which again, makes me even more close with the panelists here, with Ingjun and just, Sanjeev and others. So I think it's good to be in good company like this, and I'm excited for talking to you about some of the trends that we are about to watch in 2026. What exciting times we live in. And so with that, Happy New Year to all of you, and let's get into a good chat.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And next, Ben, do you want to do a quick intro? Yeah. I know
Yeah.
you have a super fancy background, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Video backgrounds, they're the future. New trend. Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name's Ben. I'm a principal AI engineer with Thoughtworks, working in our global AI practice. Before that, I've been working in startups, done a lot of work with streaming data, real-time data. So yeah, very excited for this chat to see what's coming. And yeah, I'm also writing a book that's just about to go into pre-release, which is building AI agent platforms for O'Reilly. So that's coming very soon. Yeah, so thanks for having me on, and yeah, looking forward to getting into the discussion.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and let's jump to our topics. Today, well, definitely we have a lot of topics, and I'm not sure whether we can finish all the topics, right? Well, and but first of all, we definitely want to have a conversation about well the 2024, sorry, 2026 outlook from the 2025 shifts. And then because well, we all have some background regarding streaming data, right? And we definitely want to talk about well, streaming batch, right? Well, people talk about the streaming batch convergence for years, right? And we did see a lot of things happen for last year regarding Confluent and regarding some other companies. And definitely we want to talk about the streaming batch convergence. And then, I mean, I could not really skip the topic about well, iceberg, right? Because, well, I mean, yeah, it's like everyone, like every single big companies like AWS, GCP, Azure, right? Well, they all have their own hosted iceberg services nowadays. Definitely, we could not skip that part, right? So we will have a probably conversation regarding that. And then we'll talk about the AI native infra for agents because yeah, a lot of people say okay, 2026 is a year for agents, right? And people also talk about agentic it's agentic infra or probably infra for agents, built for agents, right? What it really means, right? And the last we'll talk about MA because we have already seen. I read a blog from Andy Pavlo, and yeah, he used to be my advisor at CMU, and I think he listed as probably 20 plus or probably 30 MAs for last year, happened last year in 2025. Definitely, that's a huge change in the data infra space. So we will also cover that. All right. We can first talk about the 2026 outlook, right? So I mean, yeah, I just want to make some things. Well, I mean, just some random questions, right? Well, is data infra still a thing in 26? Because well, I mean, everyone is talking about AI, right? Well, everyone talk about okay, let's build an agent, right? So what an agent really means, yeah, definitely. I'm a user of Cursor, and I'm definitely also using ChatGPT like everyone, right? Well, so for sure, I can see that for coding is definitely coding agent is definitely the quality of the coding agent has really significantly improved in 2025. Or yeah, with all these agent stuffs, right? Well, agent innovations, right? What it really means to data infra, and will it be like more consolidation, more divergence, or what? And people also talk about well something like context engineering, whatever, right? And what it really means, right? So yeah, who will share some opinions regarding your views about what the 2026 outlook?
So I
I can
can,
kick it off
yeah,
since Sanjeev is still stuck on a plane. Maybe I'll kick it off.
yep, thank you.
Um, so I am a big fan of Claude Code, by the way. Since you mentioned like Cursor and others, I've
You're
been like
using
using it.
Cursor or what? Yeah.
Yeah,
Not.
no, it's really crazy as to what it can actually do. And the thing is that with things like Claude Code, it is like not just acting as a coding agent, but it can be a do-it-all kind of a tool that allows you to like do a lot more than just like, deliver code, which then leads you to believe that now you can actually solve a whole lot of these data-related problems, management problems, monitoring problems, and so forth more easily with tools like these. I think we'll see a whole advent of new ways to like slice and dice the problems that we've been facing so far into this new age. I mean, the kind of pace at which we are delivering new code and new technologies using tools like these is insane. Even like I think the Claude Code founder, I think he posted something about like the last 30 days of Claude Code features and innovations that have been produced has all been written by Claude Code itself, like no human intervention whatsoever. I mean, if that's the pace that we are able to produce new innovations and new features and new code that AI can write itself over, I think we can see some tremendous, innovations in data streaming, ways how we are storing data and all that. And I think we'll also like things like context becoming like super important, front and center of things to talk about in AI as well as beyond AI in 2026. I think we'll also see like, some new data related technologies or new ways to like handle context beyond the traditional ways of storing context. I think that's the most important thing that I think I'm excited about because we are trying to like address new age problems with legacy tools, and I don't think that's the right approach, and we need like newer ways of like thinking about it. And so just purely for context alone, I think there might be a whole slew of vendors coming up with like newer ways of storing the data, whether it be like graphs or not. I know there is a whole lot of like context graph conversations in the industry today, but I'm just saying that I think those are the things that will definitely pave the way for 2026 to be more exciting.
But if I can add to that, so Yingjun, I find your question very provocative. Is data infrastructure still a thing in 2026? I think it is. Actually, it's not data, it's data and AI. It's a unified infrastructure because the way I look at it is what a business has to do is still the same. How it's doing it is changing. For example, done for years operation system patch ETL into a data warehouse. We've also been playing with streaming ETL to make it more real time, but it's still ETL. So that is now, I think, is going to change tremendously because why do ETL? Why not just do federation? I know we'll talk about iceberg. That's a very special topic for you and your company. But it's not just that. It would be delta sharing, where I'm now making my data available to the consumers through an open standard. So then there's open telemetry to ingest. So there are all these standards that are coming in place. So what's happening is that it doesn't matter what data it is, whether it's structured, semi-structured, unstructured, we are landing it into one common storage space and then putting any compute engine on top. So the data and AI infrastructure is, to me, so important right now because of the ease with which we are meeting the needs of different use cases without having to do all these archaic things we did in the past of copying data, silos of data, data marts. So in all of this, context graph, semantic becomes really important. So the center of gravity is shifting from storage engines to a more business-friendly semantic engine. So that's where I think we are moving to right now. So I'll open it up for see what everyone else has to say.
So one of the things I like to talk about with, and so again, my slice, I've done a lot of data infra, but my slice for the last couple of years has been really focused on agents. I like to talk about intelligence from the sort of how like military talk about it, right? Intel, right? Intel has a timeliness to where it's useful for. And if you think about like the decision that you can make, the context is obviously incredibly important. If that context isn't real time, doesn't arrive in that way, you're not going to make as intelligent decisions. And so for me, it becomes really important that you've got these streams of intelligence. If you're trying to build an intelligent system, you need these streams of intelligence to come to you in a timely manner. And so that's one thing that I sort of think about and talk about quite a bit. And so, yeah, I definitely think data infra is still a thing. And yeah, I suppose, to Dinesh's point, if it's easy to make these things and you've got these coding agents where you can build this stuff, I suspect, even though we still have this consolidation of the more mature players, we're probably going to get a lot of divergence because people are going to build a lot of their own tooling for different bits and pieces and then open source it because it's not necessarily core competence. So I could see there being a lot more tooling, a lot more divergent tooling. And, again, how these markets operate. You see divergence, convergence, divergence, convergence. And so, definitely see we're kind of going to be in a bit of a Cambrian explosion of tooling. And then it'd be interesting to see over the next couple of years which bits actually get used and picked up.
Yeah.
But that's a
Yeah.
scary thought for businesses, right? Like it came to an explosion of tools. We just came to an explosion of databases, and now we have tools. I mean, how are the businesses going to make sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's that classic problem, right? Of like it costs money and time or thinking power to make decisions, but having more options is always a good thing for business. Not having the time to research all those options is challenging. But I suppose, yeah, for me, I see the positive of more options being greater than the sort of analysis
But
paralysis.
I'm Really, I'm surprised with that because to me, it's like you give kids too many options. They don't know which one to pick. I mean, how are they going to know? I mean, this to me sounds scary when you have so
It's a
many
real
options.
confusing thing for sure, Sanjeev. When I've been talking with a lot of my clients and prospects as well, that there are umpteen tools to solve one single problem, but at the same time, the clients are also getting smarter with AI. So there are clients that are mature enough to screw it, I'll just build it myself, and they start using Cloud Code or something, and they start doing it themselves. And then there are the ones that figure out what they exactly want, and they're looking at longevity of which vendor do I go with so that I'll get support throughout for the next year or so and all that. So I think there is some clarity that is coming up even with the uh, proliferation of tools, if you will, across the industry.
Yeah. Actually, one thing I want to mention is that, okay, first of all, definitely, I believe that data infra is still that thing, and it's a big thing. And essentially, so what I can see over the last 3 years was that, okay, people were started build, was start get started to build for the, say, a lot of apps using coding agents from probably 2 years ago, right? So because of Cloud Code, I think it came out for in 2023. Definitely not 2022, right? So 2023 or 2024. And what we can see is that, well, first of all, yeah, first of all, I mean, people started building a lot of applications, and then they started to think about, okay, if I want to put it into production, how do I do that? I mean, they still need to have, I mean, probably start with Postgres, right? Well, that's a great choice. And I think that's definitely probably the safest choice you can make, right? When you do a vibe coding, right? So I don't really think that's where you need to have something like a really fancy Oracle database, right? Well, no, you don't need that. So you just need to probably have a Postgres. And second thing, I mean, from a vendor's perspective, I'm super excited in that. Well, I find that all documentation, the yeah, a lot of people actually use AI to read our documentation because well, from our we use a tool called Mintify to power our website, the documentation website, and from stats we can see that okay, actually, it was written by I mean it was read by the read actually came from probably ChatGPT or Cloud or some other places, right? For the AI chatbot. And it means that okay, people actually can are used to let's say use AI to read the documentation, and it definitely help us to make our product much easier for our customers to adopt because well they don't really need to read a lot of things, right? But they can just use AI to summarize. And also from the vendor's perspective, we also noticed that well, we can actually write documentations using AI, right? Well, I mean, there are a lot of like if you write on your own, then probably there are a lot of typos, probably there are some mistakes, well, a lot of things, right? Well, and but for nowadays, well, we can just use AI to write a documentation. And the other thing I also want to mention why a data infra can it will be a big thing in is that okay in the past people do POC, right? Well, they write the code on their own, right? For example, okay, in RisingWave's case, they probably need to think about, okay, how I write this SQL, right? Well, I know that what SQL is simple, but people still need to think about, okay, how I write SQL in the past, right? But nowadays, well, people tell us that okay, they just our users and customers just tell us that well, they just ask AI to write a SQL. And essentially, I mean, some people claim that, okay, SQL was not, well, I mean, text to SQL was not really, but I guess, well, that was probably just 2 years ago. If you check for the text to SQL today, you will find that, well, I mean, the quality has already been hugely improved. And most of the time, you can get things right. I mean, even if you get something wrong, right? So you can also talk to the. I mean, you can get an error message and the feedback to chatbot, and the AI will tell you, okay, how you can fix this, right? And regarding context engineering, I know that's why we already spent a long time on this part. But well, I mean, just one sentence. Well, I feel that well for context engineering, yeah, we definitely talk a lot about the real-time context, right? Well, real-time context engine, right? Well, Confluent has an offering, but for the what I also think is that well, essentially it's I feel that's what we do need to have I mean a system to help customers to crowd context from anywhere, not just from the let's say your Salesforce hotspot, right? Or Notion, right? Or anywhere else, but also from the public domains, right? Or public internet, right? Because well, nowadays where you can see that okay, AI can actually connect to your search engine and scrap the data from the website, right? From Reddit, from I don't know whether it's allowed to scrap data from LinkedIn or Twitter. Probably no, right? But well, but
Also,
definitely it can. Yeah, you do have the tool to do that,
well,
right?
that's
So
actually, yeah, because that's actually one of XAI's or Twitter, the AI company sort of links is like really important for them, right? Is that like real-time access to the Twitter network and like breaking news as it comes. And so it's got that sort of, no longer has that, oh, like 2025 is in the future. That's out of my training window. Like kind of response that you get. Just to pick up on one of the things that you said previously was actually like this idea of like the coding agents actually makes that migration cost lower, right? So
oh
if they're
yeah,
reading
yeah, definitely.
if they're
Yeah.
reading your documentation,
That's
like
right.
so like having a proliferation of choices is really painful if you can't change or reverse those decisions quickly and easily, and you can't discover or explore those decisions quickly and easily. But coding agents allow you to do deeper spikes quicker and change, look, to actually see whether these tools are better or not. So it's actually a really useful way of just like saying, okay, cool, like I have like five options. Well, okay, cool. Why don't I spin up five prototypes at the same time, with these five different pieces of infrastructure? And now I can see which of them is best suited for my thing. And like you said, having the docs optimized for AI coding agents to consume them means that you're much more likely then for that to be something that if you're using those paradigms, that is the tool that you want, right? That could be a competitive advantage. Whereas if you've got like an older tool with like incorrect documentation going back decades and all sorts of dead ends in their docs site and that sort of thing, that can be really confusing for both a human and an AI agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, one other thing I want to also add to what you said, Yingjun, is about the context engineering part, right? So I recently wrote this research paper called Architectural Intelligence, which is primarily looking at visualizing your entire cloud from code to infra, right? So take up a code base, you give a GitHub URL, scan the URL, and get pretty much like an entire visualization of your code, understand all the dependencies and all that. But most importantly, from there you can actually like map into where this particular code resides, where it is being executed, where it is deployed, and all that, who's the owner and all that. Practically now you have like exploded this into for lack of better words, context graph, where you're like, kind of connecting with like all these different entities from practically a code. And this is kind of the context that will be great for things like what Ben mentioned, where if you're talking about migrations or if you're talking about like, future updates, adding in more tools or like more intelligence and everything into your existing architecture, suddenly you have this ability to go deeper, wider, wherever you want to understand if I change this piece of code, what happens to it? How do we change it? What kind of impact do I have? And then this practically connects not just your code base or your programming team alone, but also your uh, product management teams, your engineering teams. You can connect um, FinOps teams and so forth as well. I think context becomes like super important just purely from a code perspective in that case.
Yeah, I just want to do a very quick demo. I mean, I didn't really prepare, to be honest. Well, I didn't really prepare, but well, I mean, these days, well, what I do is that, okay, I just tell the ChatGPT, right? Well, I actually use Cursor. Typically, I use Cursor, but well, I mean, here I just use ChatGPT. You can just let the ChatGPT build a demo for you. And in Cursor, it's getting even crazier because well, you can essentially ask Cursor to run the demo for you, right? If you use ChatGPT, it's like, okay, just tell me how to build a demo for me. And it's like, well, I think we directly generate the code, right? But for Cursor, you can even ask it to run the code. That's yeah, you can see that's okay. You can read yeah, it will read the documentation, right? Well, how to do this. Okay, it definitely is yeah, search for the websites, right? So that's why I feel that's okay. These days, well, why do we need to read the documentation? I mean, on our own. No, we do not need to do that. So I mean, we can just ask AI to read it, and it even help me to let's say to check, okay, how I can use Docker, how I can, I mean, connect to my let's say AWS account. It was not possible 2 years ago. Right?
Yep.
So, I
Yep.
mean, if you think about it, okay, 2 years ago, if we want to, let's say, we talk about migration. If 2 years ago, if we want to migrate from system A to system B, then I don't know how many, probably 6 month days, right? We probably, yeah, 6 months is probably already short enough, right? 12 months is to migrate, to do a migration. But these days, well, we can just do the demo very quickly, right? Or do the POC very quickly, right? So, and we can just focus on the performance POC. Probably also focus on, let's say, securities, I mean, I don't know, the
Yeah, come
other
up.
things, right? The yeah,
You can come up
integrations,
with a
whatever.
rubric, an evaluation rubric. You can collaborate with it to create that, to analyze the security posture and all that sort of stuff. And then you can go beyond that demo and go towards like I want to benchmark these things with like this example traffic and stuff like that. Like yeah, it's super cool. Like so, and one of the things that I do quite a bit with the docs sites is you've got code examples, make sure those like are tests, and actually that becomes your kind of like spec. If you're doing like that spec driven development, you can do like an executable spec so that it's like, here's what I want to build, here's how it should work, and you've got that example for your customers. And then like that's the same example that's used by the coding agent to build it, but actually also it's like if that breaks, that in CI/CD, right now the example's broken. We've broken our like what our interface, our contract with the end user. So that obviously needs to be reverted or fixed by Claude Code or whatever you're using.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say that's for the ChatGPT is kind of crazy, right? So it has already spent probably a minute to think about okay how to write a recommendation. Sorry, how to write a demo, right?
But what
Uh,
I'll also like to see is some focus on design patterns. This is something that as programmers we've all like grown up doing, thinking about design patterns all the time. But now when we have handed it off to AI to write the code, I don't know if there is like enough focus on that. If it's using the right design patterns. Like for example, in this particular case, when you ask this question, one I would like some feedback on whether that's the right approach or not. Do I want to like move from like this to that and then using this tool or not? That's one thing. Second thing, is it even like using the right kind of design pattern in implementing this? Now I need like an entire review process to like figure out what it actually did and whether it's actually using the right technique to do it or not. I know it read the documentation. I know it's like, doing this and it's like doing this without any kind of intervention, which is amazing. But at the same time, whether it's doing the right thing or not, I'm not sure. I would like that level of intelligence, thinking from that perspective of using design patterns as well.
yeah.
I and that's actually what we should be focusing on now as engineers. If we're going up one level of the stack, then that's where we should be thinking. And like what I've seen so far with all the coding agents is a real focus on generation
Yeah.
and like nothing on like refactoring as much or like enforcing patterns within the code base. So for example, like I when I do coding with AI agents, I go very defensive. I put like I do like the NASA 10 rules. I put runtime assertions in so that I can like assert that things are right in the code, like make it way more than I would do if I was coding myself. like and yeah, like also architectural fitness functions and architectural tests. If you've got a CLI, it can only reference the API like folder in your structure, and anything that is gets puts in the wrong place triggers those tests and ends up with like errors and those need to be fixed, right? And it's like that focus has not really come through in what I've been seeing in like what does good look like for a code base?
Hmm.
Like, what are the right patterns for the right times? It's quite amorphous, and I don't think enough of that like challenge of like really like and a lot of people, if you take an AI solution, if it works, they're like, great, done, and it's just like, okay, cool. Well, like actually, the majority of your time isn't on writing the code or generating it; it's on polishing it. It's on smoothing out all those rough edges. It's on finding those like edge cases, inconsistencies, like
Exactly.
iteratively over time. And that's an area where I see like it's just like, oh well, it's 30,000 extra lines of code, commit, done. I'm on to the next bit. And you're like, no, like what are you doing?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, actually, I have to say that. Well, I mean, it generated all the code, right? So I can confirm that. Well, the code didn't really exist in our any of the definitions. It didn't really exist in our definition, and it writes all the codes. Well, I mean, so I'll probably share it later after the webinar, and you guys will can definitely, I mean, the audience can definitely run it on their own and see whether it's correct. But well, I personally think that's why the code is of definitely high quality, and I think well, probably no big issues, and you should be able to directly run. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, we have already spent a lot of time talking about this topic. Yeah, let's move to the next topic. We can actually talk about the streaming and batch convergence as well as the iceberg together, right? So first of all, I mean, unified architecture because, if you look at today's market, Databricks were last year in 2025 announced they have the new, actually kind of like old offering, but they just rebranded to a service called Lakeflow, which is basically to ingest the data from their from anywhere, right? Well, they probably want to compete with Kafka or probably Fivetran. So basically, to allow you to directly ingest data from your, I think, applications or to your data lake. Read the blocks directly. And this was released last year, and last year they also announced the Spark Streaming real-time mode. Basically, for Spark Streaming, it used to be only like for micro batch, right? Well, but they claim that okay, they want to focus on real-time mode, which means that okay, they try to use Spark Streaming to do something like event-driven processing, right? Well, every time a new event comes in, it processes data. And Snowflake also had Snowpipe streaming. I think Snowpipe streaming was probably last year or probably 2 years ago, but it was still also pretty new. Confluent, we also know that Confluent has a table flow, right? So basically, you can see that for the traditional data warehouse vendors, Databricks and Snowflake, they want to move to streaming. And the Confluent, traditional streaming vendors want to move to batch. And in the meanwhile, we also see that for open data format, we have already talked about the Iceberg for years, right? And last year, we saw AWS S3 tables. We saw GCP Big Lake. We saw Azure One Lake. All Iceberg hosted Iceberg, right? Iceberg tables. So does it mean that eventually everyone will build around Iceberg, right? Well, and streaming can be like I don't know, yeah, like directly ingest the data from anywhere to and do transformation and do some cleaning and whatever, right? Well, enrichment and then syncing to Iceberg instead of all the other query engines. Or does it mean that some other things will happen? So, oh yeah, what's your opinions? Who want to go first?
So I have to say, it's a very interesting point because if you expand the horizon and you look at what Fivetran is doing, uh, now they have acquired DBT and they also have a managed lake. So,
Oh yeah,
so
I
they
do
are
see that.
also, yeah. So basically, they all are trying to get into the same lakehouse space. If you look at what Salesforce did, Salesforce is an 800-pound gorilla when it comes to CRM. But what did they do? They bought Informatica. Because what happens is that data originates in the CRM systems, but then it went to Informatica for all the business logic, all the transformation logic. Now it's going to stay inside Salesforce. And then they also offer an Iceberg managed lakehouse. So basically, the idea, what they're trying to do is keep all the data within that or their own space. Even companies like ServiceNow, they bought a data catalog company. So this is the trend that we are seeing these days, where the differentiation between, like, everybody wants to do what hyperscalers are doing. Even AWS, their coverage of Lakehouse was not that great till a year ago when they, in end of 2024 at reInvent, they announced SageMaker Lakehouse. And since then, they've been adding Iceberg REST catalog on top of S3. They're making Redshift, which is the proprietary data warehouse, work natively with S3. So what's happened is that all of these Databricks, Snowflake, Redshift, they were all cloud data warehouses or cloud data management solutions. They've all now become compute engines because the storage is now completely not just disaggregated. Cloud took care of that. It's unbundled. So I can have my Iceberg storage and I can use Snowflake if I want, or I can even use DuckDB, or I can use Pandas, Spark on the same data. So this is the interesting transformation that has taken place. It's no longer a bundled compute and storage, disaggregated but still bundled. Now it doesn't matter. In fact, the big trend is where your data is, it doesn't matter. What matters is what compute engine you bring, and that compute engine should most likely be REST, Iceberg REST API compatible, because then it can do your workload on that one copy of data.
So I have a two points to add on to what Sanjeev said, right? One is that I think it is the platform play in a way, in my opinion. I know Sanjeev said it's like unbundled and anybody can mix and match and all that. But the reality is that everybody wants to have a grab at everything, and keeping the data more closer is how you win it. Letting the data go out of your control, just offering tools is not the way to win 2026. So most of these vendors are trying to do this, and the most easiest way to do it is have support for Iceberg, right? So have that as a common format, tout it out saying, you can bring everything in. It's like the common format that everybody's adopting. So, easy to do, right? So that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that it's also a checkbox item. I don't think a lot of the vendors are actually implementing Iceberg in a way where it is truly going to be their way how they differentiate themselves or innovate themselves or keep a grab on the market share and all that. Most of it is kind of saying we have support for Iceberg, but hey, the native way of doing things that we hold data is actually much more efficient or cost effective or faster querying capabilities and all that. So that's the other thing that you'll also notice, which is to kind of say we have support for Iceberg, but at the same time, we have a much easier, better way to doing things as well. The cost angle to unaware customer or the customer that is not wary of what the differentiation is between using Iceberg versus something else could be detrimental as to how they grab market share and grow revenue. I think that's kind of like what I see. There is a little bit of a challenge there. Iceberg is still growing, by the way. I don't think it's still fully cooked yet. There are plenty of features and capabilities that need to come in 2026 to make it more robust. I think there was a commentary on the recent Snowflake acquiring Observe thread. Somebody said Iceberg is the ideal storage format for observability and all that. I completely disagree. It's not there yet. If you want it for like cold storage of observability data, sure, absolutely yes. You cheaper data, long-term retention, whatever you want to do, you can do that with Iceberg. You want like real-time fast querying, concurrency reads and things like that, which is like what observability needs. Iceberg is not there yet. There are still more features that you need to incorporate it to make it more ideal for observability. So I'm just saying that it is at a stage where vendors want to get ahead of the market by saying we have, support for Iceberg for various other good purposes. But in practicality, I think the market still needs to catch up to like the point where they have like real needs for applying that.
Can I can I add something, Yingjun? Sorry, Ben. I know we should go to you next, but
Sure, yeah.
okay. So this is, I think, something that will be against something you are passionate about because you're into streaming data. The observe acquisition to me is not just about expanding Snowflake's TAM by getting into IT observability market and having the observability data be co-located with your traditional data. That definitely is a big thing. But I think the big driver is streaming because all these
Is what
cloud data
again?
were streaming,
Streaming.
streaming, because all these cloud data warehouses were built for batch because that's what data warehouses were meant to do. But what observed did was they figured out how to get real-time time series streaming data into S3 with Iceberg on top, and then be able to do analytics on it. That is a piece which I feel Snowflake was missing, and now it gets it with its
Again, you hit the
observability.
point on the head where which is about analytics. Yes, sure. I think that can still work with the Iceberg kind of capabilities, and Snowflake is right where it is and all that. I'm just saying observability requires real-time troubleshooting, MTTR reduction and things like that.
But
That's not the storage I would think about.
Observe was already doing it, right?
Again,
So by
I do.
Snowflake buying it, it doesn't change anything. Observe was already doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know again like to their strengths and weaknesses compared to the rest of the world. Everybody else, uses either their own like native stores or like faster query engines like Trino or something like that. Which is what observability needs. Anyway, I think we are digressing from
And
what
it's not even
Yingjun asked.
analytics. Yeah.
I think it's a good point though, because like observability data historically has been like a sort of just fixed cost. And is also something that you kind of want to minimize, and you don't necessarily want to do the same level of analysis as you would previously do on your like business data. And so you don't want to pay those prices, and so you're trying to minimize that. And but what I'm seeing now with the sort of AI applications is that telemetry data is becoming more valuable because it's becoming an asset. It's something that is like the behavior of your system that can then be used for evaluation going forward, or fine-tuning stuff. So you have this like convergence of those things being like, okay, cool. Now this observability data is actually like feeding back into the product and is actually like really valuable. But yeah, I mean, like I definitely think these open standards are great for coalescing around ways of operating data. And I think that you're right. Like we want everyone wants data real time. Like you don't want to have to wait, even if it doesn't actually, you don't actually need data to make the decision in 24 hours. You still want that like quicker real time. For example, I've used like these databases with a little like caching layer for like Redis for acceleration, but with production applications, because actually you kind of want that if you've got a data intensive application, whereas normally you might go for a Postgres or something that's got that like transactional. Actually, like BigQuery and Snowflake with a bit of caching often will get you there, especially at low volumes. Like, and you can just have both your cake and eat it with these massive engines. So I think it's super interesting that they're kind of converging.
So
Yeah.
the way I see it is, and Ben, this may sit with you since you're into building agents or even any application. If I'm a developer and I'm building a native app for Snowflake, so I have up to this point no idea about what's going into my log, metrics, traces, because it's going into a totally different silo, and I have to open a ticket with DevOps for somebody to go look into the log. Now, all of a sudden, if that data is available to me in where my other data is, and on top of that, Observe has a agent called AI SRE, and I can do a natural language, then as a developer, all of a sudden I have access to all of this log, metric, trace data, which so far was available to a different persona. So it's converged not just the data, but even the personas, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
I
Well,
100% agree. And it's so useful to have that in like the debugging and like, but if you give it to the agents, you can have that like experience of just like, because again, you'd go and just open up a new UI and search through that for the relevant logs, right? Whereas it's like, you can just be like, yeah, like something goes wrong, like trigger an agent to like work it out and
Yeah.
you work out a couple of products. So I think I kind of agree. It's like maybe AI is taking us back to that like generalist piece now because we have to be sort of if we're going to use agentic coding, you have to be a bit outside and slightly elevated, right? And a little bit more like not like a data scientist who hyper focuses on this piece, the model building, or a software engineer who focuses on just the productionization, or an ops person who focuses on the infra or the logging. It's like actually, you're now responsible for that whole system because you can with AI cover all those bits. So yeah, I think we're seeing that cohesion.
yeah, I think for there are a couple of points. Well, first one is that's what observability actually mean a lot of things, right? Well, I mean, if you talk to IoT guys, they probably don't really care about for the historical data, right? Well, because for historical data, they're probably more for logging purpose. They only care about probably the last 1 minute data, right? Well, why? So if your sensor goes wrong, you probably don't really need to debug. I mean, by figuring out okay what it was look like probably an hour ago or probably a day ago, right? Where they only care about the real time. And but what I mean on the other hand, if we talk about something like Datadog, right? Datadog scenario like okay, monitoring, let's say my Kubernetes, whatever. Yeah, that's performance can matter, right? Well, because I probably don't really want to if my system crashed, right? So I probably don't really want to, let's say, sitting there and waiting for the query to return, right? So query result to return. Yeah, that's one point. And the second thing here, that's why I want to mention that, well, yeah, I have to say that, well, for Iceberg, it was not really, at least from the functionality wise, well, it was not really for observability. One simple example is I mean, the S3, the JSON support. Well, in Iceberg, it was a variant, which was included in Iceberg v3. But v3 was just released last year, and so people probably, yeah, last year definitely. I mean, forget about the performance, right? So even if we talk about the functionality, I mean, there's gap, right? But for this year, because v3 has already released for sure, I believe that's why it will address that pain point. And also regarding the performance, I mean, I probably would not comment too much on that because I mean, if you check with any OLAP vendors, they will tell you that's what they probably have the fastest OLAP query engines. So yeah, I think well, definitely the performance will be improved a lot. Well, I'm not too worried about that. So, but well, I mean, also I'd like to also mention that well, Iceberg is a really good story for the observability team because well, I look why people are worried about well, the observability stack isn't Datadog good enough? I think well, Datadog is great too, right? Well, everyone love that. But for the biggest issue is still about the money, right? But still about the cost, right? Well, if you read the recent blogs from Hacks, right? Well, the data company, they also complain a lot about the their Datadog cost. So the narrative is more about okay, whether we can switch to probably cheaper observability too, right? And that's why. And also in the meanwhile, people are thinking about, okay, I just want to switch the to once. I don't really want to switch vendors every single year, right? So I don't really want to. That's painful, and I don't really want to be vendor lock in, right? So I think definitely that's a very good story from Iceberg. So yeah, I mean, yeah, again, well, I mean, I think Observability definitely means a lot, but I would not say that okay, like well, Iceberg is the killer, killer app or killer infra for the observability. No, it's not like that. It's just the case by case. Well, based on your domains, based on if you really want to debug within, let's say, figure out what the trends were within seconds, well, I mean, forget about, well, yeah, you probably can just use some other tools, Victoria Metrics, or Grafana, whatever, right? Whatever.
Exactly.
I, th
Exactly.
I think
Um,
David makes a good point though, in the chat, in that like you don't have to be monolithic in these decisions.
Agreed.
If it's all
oh, yeah.
stored in Parquet under the hood, you can have one for latency for a subset of the data, and one for long-term storage, and different engines to drive those different things. So, yeah, again, like I think, yeah, people have been told like, oh, that data is super valuable, but if it's like, I worked at an Internet of Things company, and if it was like sub-second temperature readings from 5 years ago, yes, keep the aggregated data maybe, but you probably don't need every single reading from every single second,
For sure,
from
yeah.
that time ago. And like, actually, it's those sorts of things that's like very difficult for businesses to say, oh, we might need that data. And it's like, yeah, but you don't. And that's where you get the cost savings rather than like
Exactly.
format often.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah. We mentioned for the observe, right? So we mentioned to a Snowflake acquiring observe, and yeah, we're probably I'm not sure whether we have time to cover this, but well, I mean, yeah, when we talk about the MA, right? So you can see that well, there are a lot of MAs for last year, and which one surprised you, and which one you think that was very interesting? Any opinion?
You got a lot listed there. I need to read
I
through
mean, this
this.
is from Andy Pavlov's blog. I can share the link later. But for I mean, he actually listed all the acquisitions happened last year, right? From data stacks
It's
to
an amazing
yeah,
blog, absolutely amazing blog.
yeah,
I talked to him right after he published the blog, and he's like, It used to take me a day or two to write it, and then every year it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger because there's just so much happening." So uh, this is so Snowflake versus Observe, to me, I did some some press quotes and some press stuff with that, but I have to say that came as a surprise. Although the rumors were swirling, so we knew it was coming, but because we are crossing boundaries where people, like, if a company is really good at selling to data consumers, and now they buy something for which the consumer is a platform engineer who goes to KubeCon and goes to Kubernetes events. So to me, the surprising part is not technology. Surprising part is how do you merge your go-to-market motion to meet the needs of your data analysts, your data scientists, your data engineers, and now your DevOps engineers. I- Like, even when ServiceNow goes and buys these companies, it's like, wait, that's not your forte. How are you going to appeal to these new personas? So to me, that's a very interesting question, and I think the problem is not technology. The success of a M&A hinges upon execution.
yeah.
To me, the Neon Databricks acquisition was a very, very smart move. I thought that was um, one thing that I really appreciated last year. I know there was a lot of competitive tussle, tug of war between Snowflake and Databricks at that time about who's going to acquire a similar one and all that. But I think
So the that's not a surprise to me. The surprise again, it's not. I think from technology point of view, I think it's brilliant because why have OLTP overlap? I mean, that differentiation should have gone a long time ago, and now they can do it with lake base. My surprise is the amount of money Databricks pays for Tabular, for Neon, compared to how much revenue they make. But maybe this is where Databricks sees that the upside is so high that it cost doesn't matter, the price you pay doesn't matter because returns will be so much higher.
I think that pattern is like kind of going across the industry. Even this whole Observe acquisition is also like that, right? I mean, the cost that they paid is like almost 15x.
Mhm.
So, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, I think definitely there are a lot of interesting acquisitions. Like, if you think about the Five Trend, right? Well, Five Trend earlier this year acquired Tobacco, right? The SQL Mesh company, and later they acquired the DBT, right? Well, so it means that they actually have the yeah for DBT it's more about the transformation, right? Well, and for more about the transformation on top of the data lake. So I won't be very surprised if they launch something like a query engine. So that's what because what you mentioned that's where they have the hosted iceberg, right? So they have already had the ingestion engine and they have already had the transformation and what's next for them? I mean definitely a warehouse, right? Well, basically a query engine. And so that's where they have the full picture of they have the everything included,
But,
right? So
Which company are you talking about, Yingjun? I'm sorry, I missed it.
five
Topico,
trend,
Five
five
Trend. Okay.
trend, yeah. So
yeah,
And
and
That
and
will make sense.
that's also quite interesting just because of how early Topico is, right? Like it was what, only around for 18 months or so, if I'm not mistaken. So like certainly like arose as that DBT competitor, but actually like almost by the time it was like starting to get some popularity, it was acquired.
Uh, yeah, and also the other interesting one is the Informatica, right? So I'm not sure whether you noticed that was no Salesforce actually have everything in the data infra world, right? They have Informatica and they also own Heroku, right? The hosted, well, I mean, the managed service company, right? Well, Heroku is they have the managed Postgres, whatever. They also have a new blog about, well, actually from last year about, well, their regarding their hosted Postgres service. So I won't be very surprised if they also enter the data market because they have already paid $8 billion for Informatica, right? Why not
and
just the
and their own Tableau and their own MuleSoft and their own Slack. So yeah, they have the complete stack. And with Agent Force on top to build agents, that so basically they have all the building blocks they need to be a data player, which is so Yingjun, to your point. I, as an analyst, I never covered Salesforce because I'm a data and AI analyst, and Salesforce was CRM. But now it's very much in my space. And by the way, so is Palantir and all of these other companies that we've been talking about that was peripheral to what I did are certainly data platform. We haven't talked about SAP and some of the ERP companies are full-fledged data platforms.
yeah.
ServiceNow including.
And it's kind of clear from that, like it has the whole stack, but every single one of those is like somewhat legacy, definitely enterprise kind of situation. So it's like it's quite interesting to see like that's their sort of play. Like, if I mostly worked in startups and like that would not like any of those tools would be like laughed out of the room at a small company, but at a large company, they're often just a reality based on like the historic sort of integrations and requirements and like, okay, cool, we've acquired these five companies. The only thing in common is this thing, right? Okay, let's use that. Um, so yeah, like it's just interesting that it's like, as opposed to Fivetran buying like startups that are like 3 years old, 2 years old, and like Informatica is like, yeah, the literal old school ETL piece.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think we have spent 1 hour talk about yeah, the trend and what will happen in 2026. And unfortunately, I couldn't have enough time to cover the AI native infra for agents, but definitely there are a lot of interesting things. Yeah. So obviously, I think we're in data infra world, we can see that that definitely trend about okay, acquisition, yeah, the convergence. Well, definitely there are some new vendors came out, right? And people probably build things, observability tools. People build AI SREs, and people build the probably iceberg vulnerability, where whatever, right? So it's definitely very interesting time. And also, I don't know how many acquisitions will happen and how many new startups will be founded next year. So we'll be super excited to watch that. All right. I think that's all for today's webinar. So if you are interested in, I mean, guys, if you're interested in yeah, the RisingWave, stream processing, streaming data, Iceberg, whatever, I mean, feel free to join our Slack community. And yeah, I also share the ChatGPT, the demo built by ChatGPT with everyone later after the webinar. All right. Cool. Thanks, everyone. And have a good morning, evening, and afternoon.
Thanks
Thanks.
for having us, Yingjun.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. True.
Bye.